The Venture Lab is 4 years old. It was found. It's a joint partnership between Orange County, UCF, the High Tech Corridor Council, and a little support from an angel investment group called the Winter Park Angels. And its function is to help very early stage technology startups that are interested in getting things going as a business entity to do just that. So we help them with their business planning. Potentially with fundraising, just sitting there as coaches and mentors. We're a group of folks that have all had our own companies. We've all raised venture capital, stuff like that. And it's just a free resource that's available solely for technology entrepreneurs that are wanting to start high-tech businesses in Central Florida. Today, I am here to chat about some data that I picked up as part of being a member of the Clean Tech Network. And this particular organization focuses on early stage clean tech companies. And it's integrally tied to the venture capital community because so many of the economies that are based on clean tech have a fundamental thread of early stage venture-backed technology companies. And so the investment world in this particular domain is particularly important to economic development. And then that combined, of course, with the established corporations like Siemens and Mitsubishi and whatnot together are what make these economies out in California and Austin and whatnot hum and use this clean tech domain as the foundation for doing that. Okay, so my presentation is their data, not mine. I want to make sure everybody's clear that this is coming straight out of a presentation, basically cut and pasted from, with permission. So this is starting last year. Actually, the last 6 years in the world of venture capital have been rapidly growing with respect to investments in clean tech. And so last year was the sixth year where there was a large growth. As was the case in pretty much everything else, Q4 pretty much stunk. And we'll see if that rebounds here. But this particular subdomain in the world of venture capital probably has the best chance of any of rebounding if anything does. Solar was the dominant investment theme. However, we'll talk about that more later because early stage investments in solar are not necessarily growing, but the later stage large mezzanine type rounds are. So we'll get into that. Smart grid and wind and biofuels were the other sections that did well, but solar dominated with 40% of the investment going into solar. 2009 was a year of transition that the group expects this year to also be depressed. No surprise, I'm sure. Everything else is in the same boat. But in the long run, the drivers that are driving the clean tech focus and investment will remain intact over the course of many years. And so therefore, the group believes that in the long run, this particular sector will continue to be a strong one to focus on. That's just because China and India are going to continue to grow and migrate towards the upper middle class, and therefore their energy demands are going to grow, which is going to create that shortage, which is driving a lot of the efforts that we're all focused on. And of course, climate change is still a key issue as well. Okay, I think I've covered this, and for the sake of time, I'm going to keep trucking through the slides. As we already mentioned, Q4, very significant downturn. The last time they saw that big of a drop in this particular sector was back in 2006. As I had mentioned previously, 40% of the venture capital dollars went into solar. You can see, based on this particular chart, how big of a differential there was between solar and the next largest category, which was biofuels. And then the other categories are in single digits with respect to percentage of total dollars invested. Okay, solar. Let's start with that. I'm going to go one by one through the subdomains. This particular group, again, which spends their entire, function of focusing on venture capital investment in clean tech, feels fairly strongly that solar is experiencing a bubble. And that's real important for us to pay attention to because of where these VC dollars are, and with respect to, again, economic development, these early stage companies are often the drivers. And most of the dollars that did get invested last year were in thin film, PV, which was up 315% from 2007. You can see the big jump there. The second highest category was concentrated solar, which sounds like it was huge with the 672%, but it had a tiny base to start from. And we've seen a couple of those companies coming through both the Winter Park Angels and the Venture Lab. So even here in Central Florida, there's a couple of companies in the concentrated solar space that we're aware of. But as I mentioned, the reason these numbers are so skewed towards solar is because there's these huge mega rounds of mezzanine and later stage funding going through, which are kind of distorting the numbers, because if you look at the seed stage dollars, they're very consistent year over year. They're not increasing. So there's not new early stage investment increases going on in solar, only later stage. So that's a sign that that particular market is maturing. And from an innovation perspective, we may want to start looking at some of the other categories. Just to reiterate the point, the top 10 deals done, every one of them was over $100 million in a single round of investment in those companies. So, and we'll get into the other domains and you'll see the difference. So it's, again, later stage. Next category is biofuels. There was an increase last year from 2007, but it's down from 2006. This particular metric occurred this way because of the backlash on using corn as ethanol. And so, as many of you know that have studied or paid attention to this, the food shortages were creating. Corn was the foundation of the first round of biofuels, and of course with all the food shortages in third world countries, the press got a hold of that, and turned out that ethanol is not necessarily as effective, or it's actually my gas mileage in my car is worse with ethanol and certain things like that. But it did increase this last year, but it was led by algae and cellulosic type of technologies. And they had big growth, and there's a belief that this particular subdomain will continue to grow. We have some great research going on in this domain out at UCF. Dr. Henry Daniels is doing some good work there, and I'm sure there's many other efforts throughout the state and in our state universities, and definitely at a national level as well. And to point out the difference, this was the second largest category, and there was only one deal over $100 million in this domain in the top 10 deals done last year. And number 10 was at $31 million, which is still a large, nice mezzanine round, but it's a much more rational number than what we saw in solar. Next category is energy storage. This would be batteries and fuel cells and stuff like that. There is a migration going on from fuel cells, which was the focus a few years back now, to advanced battery technologies. And in particular, lithium-ion batteries are dominating, but this category was much smaller as the third highest category compared to the previous two. So even though one particular technology is dominating, which is lithium-ion, you can see that the other subcategories in this particular field are still very small. Wind is rebounding. However, there's been a kind of a transition. In the early days of the focus on wind, there's a lot of large investments in wind farms, because there was already wind turbine technology out there that worked and continues to be a steadfast solution for harvesting the wind power. But those dollars are drying up, at least with respect to venture capital. That does not mean that the larger energy companies are not investing in this. It just means VCs have considered a mature technology, and of course they focus on innovation. So instead, with respect to wind, the focus is very much on technologies that can optimize in a subcomponent type of fashion within those larger turbines and other types of harvesting technologies. So wind is a very young category. Again, the biggest deal was very large, but that was working on a large generator. But the number 10 was only an $8 million deal, and that's an early stage VC type of a round. So very young category. So if anybody knows of any wind technologies going on that are components that can value add into these large farms or be sub-licensed into some of the larger companies, this is where we should focus. Okay, welcome aboard Obama. He, before he even started, has been campaigning and articulating that he's already putting initiatives, or has intent to put initiatives together for green building certification, LEED certification, and whatnot. That is Jim Fenton from FSEC is here, and he's going to talk for a half hour as our keynote here today. And this is a particularly strong area for the Florida Solar Energy Center, which is a UCF research center. So this is good for our region for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's a great way for local governments to do incentives, but also it's an area that we have some domain expertise on that we might want to focus on. Water is actually a personal favorite of mine, because if I had to hedge my bets and if I decided to start an early stage company tomorrow, I would probably bet on water, because it has all the criteria for somebody trying to start something, because you always have to be ahead of the curve, and you have to kind of look ahead and see where the problem's going to be. And water is going to be a very scarce resource somewhere in the next decade. And when that happens, trust me, the world will begin to panic and people will start paying top dollars for technologies that can optimize water. So it's very young today, very kind of hypothetical out there in the VC world. The VCs tend to not invest in this stuff, but things like membrane technologies, desalination optimization, pollution control, that kind of stuff, I think is critical. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears for a quick second and just chat about venture capital. No surprise, we don't have a lot of venture capital in Florida, especially early stage. Everybody that knows me knows this is my particular pet peeve. And once again, the numbers are pointing this out. This is a listing of all the VC firms that invested in those top 10 deals of each of the different categories. Not a single one of them is anywhere near Florida. Most of them are all in California, as you might imagine, but Austin and Boston, all the usual areas. And as John pointed out, California, Austin, and Boston also happen to be the areas where clean tech is a core foundation of their economies. So there is a direct link, in my opinion, of venture capital, early stage companies, and the maturation of these types of economies. So once again, we need to pay attention to not just do we have the right technologies and the right people, but do we have the capital to fund these companies and get them started, which frankly right now we don't. So just to wrap up, as I already mentioned, green buildings is on the queue as a potential hot topic for next year. There's a lot of government focus on it as well, so a good place to potentially focus on. The other areas are grid, smart grid technology, so anything that can optimize our grid, which by the way is one of the poorly run grids in the entire planet. It's pretty sad. Part of that is because we were one of the first ones to implement one, and therefore we're dealing with data technology. So there's a lot of focus on how to get that up to the standards that the rest of the world is already on. And I guess that's it. So I only had 10 minutes, and I think I also went over. So once again, we're
any questions?
Yes, any questions? Not that I have the answers, but I'll do my best. Cool. Way to keep it on time.